Hi, my name is Barrie Crampton. Welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Crampton. This is another episode of my vlog, and it's concentrating on finance again, with the government talking about helping EV owners to buy cars with cheap rate finance. One of my best mates used to work for a small finance company. It was very handy for me because you could actually speak to the boss there, and they used to underwrite business that other companies wouldn't take on. There was no way of overriding the computer if someone failed on our mainstream finance lender's credit scoring system, but if they were marginal fails or they had a reasonable excuse, my friend's boss would weigh up the situation and make a decision based on human logic and not computer binary code. Their finance company was an invaluable asset to me, and in return for them lending my customers money, I'd lend them a hand if they had to repossess any cars in my area. It always took at least two people, and the person who usually accompanied my mate was suffering from the equivalent of car repossessors' post-traumatic stress disorder. So as not to waste the police's time when we were snatching a car, we'd always call at the local station and warn them that we were going to get a car from a certain person at a certain address, just in case they reported the car stolen and the police went on a wild goose chase. We would also put a repossession notice through the owner's door. I have to say that my friend was a very nice guy, and if the person who was in arrears had genuine reason or even a semi-plausible story, we would always give them more time to pay. Once the customer was so skint they couldn't afford to put fuel in the car, so we gave them a lift to work in ours. In some cases, even though we were under strict orders to get the vehicle, he'd give the owner more time and tell his boss that we couldn't find him. The guy I was standing in for was a very inoffensive guy. He was never antagonistic or threatening in any way. If things looked like they were going to get rough, they called in another specialised firm, so he should never have been in harm's way. But he'd had a couple of very close calls, the first being when they'd recovered a car from the end of a very long driveway. They'd pushed it down the drive without starting the engine so they wouldn't alert the owner, and then he sneaked back up the drive to post the termination notice. The letterbox was about a foot from the bottom of the door. He pushed the flap in very carefully, trying not to make a noise and alert the occupants, when all of a sudden the door flew open and a woman hit him over the head with a hand brush. Almost losing consciousness, he collapsed to the floor. Then she slammed the door in his face. That was pretty much all in a day's work, but a few weeks later he was on a fairly routine call to an address in a rather rough part of Manchester. He'd knocked on the door to talk to the owner and to try and get either cash or a cheque for the customer's finance arrears. The door opened about 3 inches, which was as wide as the safety chain would let it. The rep was satisfied that this meant that the Cyclops who was peering through the gap couldn't suddenly swing the door open and hit him with a brush, so he felt relatively safe as he politely and apologetically explained that if the customer missed any more payments, he would be in danger of having his car repossessed. Unfortunately for the rep, the gap in the door was just wide enough to fit the barrel of a side-by-side shotgun through, and now there was one pointing right between his eyes. Cyclops said, "Really? Well, you're in danger of getting your head blown off, so what are you going to do now?" The rep put his hands in the air and inched backwards down the garden path. When he was level with a concrete wall, he dropped to the ground and crawled back to the car like he was on an army assault course. We'd called several times to try and collect a payment from this particular customer, but he made it clear that he had no intention of paying, and as nice as my mate was, he was losing his patience, and so was I. Arrears calls had to be made when the customer was at home, and that usually meant it was after office hours. And trying to find where this customer was hiding his car at night was seriously interfering with our social life. The customer, who knew their car was about to be repossessed, would often park them away from their houses so as they couldn't be located. But what they mostly forgot was that when they applied for finance, they'd have to give their name and address of their employers, so we knew where they worked. We were sat across the road and we could see his car was parked in the first employee space right next to the office block. There were 2 visitor spaces, but there were no cars in them to shield us from view. The front of the office overlooked the car park and it was made completely of glass. No breaks, no waist-high windows, all glass. And all the desks were facing forward towards the car park. It wasn't going to be easy to get the car without being seen and lynched by his fellow co-workers, who would probably think that we were trying to steal it. When the dealers filled in the finance documentation, under the vehicle details section was a space for the key number. Dealers by definition are very lazy and aren't very imaginative, so most of them just made up a number. Invariably it was AB1234. But this one looked like an authentic Mazda number, so we may just be in luck. The local Mazda dealer didn't have the correct blank, so we had to resort to the hit or miss Acme key cut install on Blackburn Market. It needed to be a slick operation as we'd only get one chance to snatch the car, and I would have to be very quick. Our main worry was that the key wouldn't fit properly and we'd be spotted struggling to try and open the door. So we drove onto the car park, into the visitor space next to the Mazda. The receptionist was only a few feet away from us on this side of the car where my mate was sitting, and was naturally curious as to who we were. My mate held his briefcase up, opened it up and obscured her view. While he pretended to be looking for something, I wound my window down, reached over, inserting our freshly cut key into the driver's lock of the Mazda. It was a miracle. The market cut key worked, and I saw the button inside flick up. I jumped into the driver's seat and my mate reversed his car off the car park. The key fit perfectly in the door, but the car must have had a new ignition lock fitted at some time. Although the key went in easy enough, there was no way I could get it to turn. I had about 30 seconds to switch the ignition on before the alarm would go off. I should have aborted our mission and jumped out straight away, but I persevered with the key until the klaxon of the alarm sounded and alerted everyone in the building to my presence. All the women rushed to the window and were staring at me, while all the men in the glass-fronted office were running for the exit and to get me. I didn't think the lynch mob would give me time enough to explain, so I took a bow towards my female audience, then I legged it like Billy Whiz. I wasn't there a few weeks later when Shotgun Charlie's car was repossessed, so let's just say that this isn't true. I can't swear it happened because I wasn't there, and I'm not sure that I should even be repeating it, but this was the good old days, and it also makes for a good ending to my story. For the tough cases, when there was likely to be some Barney rubble, the Cockney specialist repossessors from the smoke were called in. This was a long time before privacy glass became popular, but they turned up in a black car with blacked out windows. A gentleman dressed in a very expensive suit, and who I think Vinnie Jones must have taken acting lessons from, got out of the XJ6, walked down the path with his clipboard, looking like he was there to do a survey. He knocked on the door, then took a step back. As soon as it opened on the safety chain and Cyclops peered through the gap, Vinnie kicked the door in, ripping the chain out of the frame and flooring the guy who was standing behind it. Stepping into the hallway, he picked up the shotgun, ejected the cartridges and said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." The car was repossessed. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.